Welcome to House Call. This is episode 2 with Ryan Frame. And Ryan, thank you for agreeing to be on House Call. I'm so glad that you're here today. Welcome.
No worries.
No worries. So, Ryan, you and I had the privilege of working together on one of your podcasts on Mixcloud called Minutia.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the opportunity to be on there. And then you agreed to come on the show and kind of talk about what you're working on today. So thank you for being open to do that.
Yeah, no worries.
So let's open it up. Tell us a little bit about you. Like, where did you grow up? Where do you live? And a little bit more about Ryan.
Oh boy. I was born in Texas
Okay.
and around the age of 6 ended up in Florida and grew up in Charlotte County, which is, I mean, it's all right if you want to keep your kids safe, but it is so boring. So, you just, this was the 80s and 90s. So,
Yeah.
I was one of those kids riding bikes all over God's green earth and you know, home before the lights come on in the street, and it was pretty cool. Um,
And is Charlotte County like in the Florida Panhandle, or is it kind of in Central Florida, or where is it in the
that's in
map?
the Gulf Coast. That's about 100 miles south of Tampa.
Oh, okay. I actually used to live in Tampa
Oh
myself, actually
boy.
in
Yeah.
Brandon,
Oh
actually
yeah.
in the 90s. But back to you riding around on your bikes. My mom and dad in the summers, they would be like, kick us out early in the morning and be like, don't come home until dinner. Was it the same for you?
Ish. Yeah, to a degree. If it was a weekend or something, I mean, I would be gone anyway. They didn't have to kick me out. I would just,
Totally.
just get out and ride, and you know, um, one of the things I would do is I would go to 7-Eleven and get like one of those big thirst busters.
Yeah.
And eventually I figured out that I could put cereal in it.
Oh, yeah.
So I would climb trees, and we had like a cordless phone, because that was a big deal. And so I'd sit up in this tree with a cordless phone calling my friends, eating honey bunches of oats, and
Oh, yeah.
just taking it easy.
There was a
uh,
lot of freedom. I have a daughter, and we talk about it all the time because I live outside of San Jose, and she did a lot of bike riding in her middle teen years, but I always knew where she was at. My parents, they just had no idea. There was a lot of freedom in that.
yeah.
Things have changed. So,
Yes.
so you grew up in Florida.
Yeah.
Where did you move, or did you move? Where are you at post growing up?
uh I mean, I stayed in Florida for a hot minute. I moved to Orlando with my brother, um 2001, I believe. um Growing up in Florida and ending up in the scene in high school, uh, Orlando becomes a pretty good hot spot for you to hang out, you know.
So, kind of tell me, in that Orlando scene, is that where you had your first dose of house and electronic music, or kind of
No, 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 no.
what
My
was
my
your experience in all of that?
my earliest memory of electronic music was when I was living in Texas, probably, I mean, that had to have been 4 or 5, definitely pre-kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I used to have this toy Spider-Man on a motorcycle. And in the cul-de-sac of the street I lived on, uh, there's a playground, and I would get my dad's. It probably wasn't an original Walkman, but I think it was like a realistic, from Radio Shack, really high quality uh, Walkman, and I would put Herbie Hancock Future Shock.
Oh my God.
Okay, I would put that
So
in
good.
the
So
the, the
good.
player, and I would go down to the merry-go-round, and I
Yeah.
would get that thing going, and I would listen to Future Shock and have Spider-Man hauling ass in the dirt, going round and 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 round. And I'm that's my first dose of electronic music. Growing up, it was a while before I really started turning an ear towards music in general. I grew up in
Okay.
a house where my dad was a drummer. Uh, my grandfather was a drummer. He, on my mom's side, he played for like who was it? Rosemary Clooney, Bob Hope. He would get birthday cards from Bob Hope
Oh wow.
all the time, like, until they both passed away, so they were pen pals. But I really wasn't too keen on music for a long time. I was really all about like just drawing, art, visual media.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I guess, I mean, really what happened was one day I was going to draw something and I had the blank paper in front of me and it was just like I saw what I wanted to do. And that took the wind out of the sails because that was the whole joy of it was creating it.
Yeah.
And so there was a pretty strong downtime where I really wasn't doing much art, wasn't listening to much music. And this was like ninth grade by the time I started like kind of started listening to music again, like you do as a teenager.
Oh yeah.
The only CDs I had was Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys,
That's a good one.
um, the Akira soundtrack,
Yeah.
and Metal by Pink Floyd.
Oh,
And those were like heavy on rotation. And
mm,
then one day my brother, now this is what got me into what we do today.
yeah.
So my brother, he had dabbled in all kinds of electronic music because his band growing up when he was a kid was Pink Floyd, and they have a lot of electronic sounds and pioneering instruments of that regard. And he had always listened to like Front 242, Nine Inch Nails, stuff like that, things on wax tracks.
Mhm.
um Psychosonic was a big deal back then. Everything using that stylophone, right? I mean, it was everywhere.
It
It was
was.
everywhere. Mortal Kombat, obviously. That And
Yeah.
so, well, one day, uh, he had this disc that was called Psychedelic Techno, Hard Trance Volume 3.
I remember these.
And it had the UK import sticker on it,
Yep.
fractals. And I'm like, what is this? I put it in, and that was it. And it was early trance,
Yeah.
right? So it
Fast.
would well, it was, yeah, some of them were fast, but a lot of it was just like trippy
Yeah.
and just strange noises, not at all like what trance is today with those massive arpeggiating saw waves, like
Yeah.
into infinity. Like you're buying trance, you're going to hear for the most part arpeggiating saw waves.
Yeah.
And so it was probably 93, and he had gotten this CD from a friend that he was hanging out with named Tim, who was a DJ at a local nightclub. And that was it. I heard those sounds, I heard the arrangement. It wasn't um, confined by lyrics.
Mm-mm.
So there was total freedom in your head with what you wanted the music to mean, right? Um, and I would say that's like the first stepping stone that really brought me in, was that album. And then the funny thing was is years later, like you do, you go looking for CDs that you had or music that you had that you don't anymore. And I ended up on Discogs,
Yeah.
and I looked at the artist on there and I was like, oh my gosh, POB was on there. Oh my gosh, Man with No Name was on there. Oh my gosh, Art of Trance was on there. Like, what? Holy moly. I've been listening to these. And this was by the time I can't even remember. I was just like, holy moly, I was listening to those guys back then. I did not even know it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's where it started, like the
Yeah.
absolute start of my intrigue into the music.
That's a really good start. I always love stories where it's like you get a CD from someone back then, or someone brought you to an event, or
Yeah.
there was always someone bringing it because you weren't hearing it on the
Oh
radio.
no. Oh
You know,
no. Not even
maybe
close.
like when I in '99 when I moved to Cleveland, once in a while they would have like a PBS public radio kind of
Right.
thing where they would play something for an hour or two and you would hear it. but it was super underground in the
Oh,
night.
well, not in my hometown. Oh no. No, the closest you were getting is whatever they were gonna shovel into your head on MTV or the radio.
Oh
So it
yeah.
was like Ace of
Yes.
Base or bust. And
Yes.
so yeah, like that was it. And so like I'm hearing all this stuff that's like coming from across the pond. I'm like, what are they doing over there? Like, what is going
Oh,
on? And then
so
come to find out, throughout years and you learn about origins and stuff, it's like, well, wait, it's homegrown. It came from Detroit.
right.
Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and it was just absolutely amazing. Especially when I look back and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been listening to these guys for years, absolute years.
So then for you, you kind of started to dabble and hear it and
Mhm.
like it. Where did it start to transition into something that you wanted to do for you? Into, making music and DJing music and kind of what is that story and evolution for you?
Right. Well, my buddy Aaron and I sent you pictures of him. Uh, he and I we had known each other since like third grade. We still talk on the phone and everything. And he had always listened to Kraftwerk, and so therefore I listened to Kraftwerk occasionally whenever we would hang out. And he had gotten meningitis and ended up in a hospital in ninth grade,
Oh
and his
God.
head swole up like the Elephant Man and had tubes coming out of his head and everything. And so during recovery in his house, his dad got him a floor model Packard Bell. When's the last time you heard that? Packard Bell computer from Sears, and Aaron taught himself DOS. And he came across this program called Scream Tracker, and it's just absolutely insane the way, and I'm dyslexic, so like looking at these grids and the way you enter in, it's literally like just coding music. But our love for like trying to figure out what was going on was so steep that we would go to any lengths to try to like just create something. And so the computer, so the instrument was basically at his house, and he would call me over and we would play around with it and make stuff. And then when eBay came out, Aaron was all over it. He bought, I mean, he had every Roland XOX synth you can imagine. I think I sent you a picture of my buddy Lauren and Aaron holding up a TB303. We're like 17.
Gosh, I'm
It
gonna
was,
put all these pictures in here too.
yeah,
I've got your music too to play, so we're gonna definitely dig into that and add some visuals to it as well. For that is so awesome. It's interesting too. Like your friend had this illness, and then you ended up in this kind of microcosm of focus that
yeah,
it's almost like similar for me. It's something had to happen that triggered the event, I think
yeah,
is the way to look at it. And
yeah.
those synths are now everybody's trying to replicate them through
Oh,
samples.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
can't even I can't even remember how much he paid for the 303. It was probably like $300. I mean,
Yay!
this is probably when people were just like, yeah, I got one. You want it?
Yeah.
It was it was something else. I didn't believe that he had it either, because he called me up. He's like, Ryan. I'm like, what? He goes, meow, 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 meow. Like
Oh yeah.
I'm like, sure, buddy. That's yeah, right. You're right. Nope. That's when he came over to my house with it. And that picture that I sent you with my buddy Lauren and Aaron holding up the 303, that's well into it being adopted into our friend circle. Like we drove around town with this thing because it has batteries. And so we would take one of those cassette adapters, we plug it into the headphones,
Yes. Oh
put
yeah.
that into the car,
Oh my
and we would
God.
just drive around town going meow 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 meow, meow. Like with this
Playing
303.
around.
And I mean, like all the stupid stuff that you do in ninth grade, but we
Yes.
did it with a 303. Like we would drive around and crank it in my car. And this is like retirementville, Florida. And
Yeah.
we would literally have this thing, and Aaron would just look over and stare at the car next to us and just slowly raise the 303. And the people next to us are just, I don't know what's going through their head. But I mean, we would do stuff like that with this 303. I mean,
Youth.
yeah, all the time, all the time. Yeah.
That is really cool. So long history, you started playing around with it.
Yeah.
What happened next for you?
Uh, my brother and I and Lauren and Aaron went to Zen 97 in Florida. I can't remember the exact location, but it was huge. You know, Cosmic Baby was there, Rabbit in the Moon, and
Oh,
it was the
wow.
first time I saw John Digweed. And that was pretty much it. We'd spent all night walking around, enjoying everything. Um, but my brother, the last thing he said before he disappeared was, "Do not miss John Digweed."
That's
Like,
so funny.
I was
So
like, "Okay."
what year was this that
This was
you
97,
and
1997.
was Jimmy Van M with John Digweed yet at that point? Because he's an Orlando guy.
Probably. I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, I would
yeah.
say at that point, it was probably a good bet. If I still had, I had the Zen 96, you know, big flyer, but I don't know what happened to my Zen 97. I'm pretty sure at that point, if he was in Florida, um, but it was crazy. It was in this giant, it was a sunrise set right after Rabbit in the Moon,
Wow.
and it was in this massive hangar, right? Because Zen 97 was on this racetrack. It was this massive racetrack. And so like all these different hangars around the area for like, you know, people to observe, you know, probably like hot rods and all kinds of stuff like that was then turned into like the main area. And so we get there, and I want to say, like, hindsight being 2020, there's like a handful of songs I think it was that I walked in on. It might have been Humate 3.1.
Oh
It
yeah.
it may have been A Prayer to the Music by Marco Polo, but his remix of it. Because
Yeah.
I remember it was the first time we heard that progressive sound. You got to remember, we were listening to
Early
whatever we could
progressive.
get our
Oh yeah.
hands on.
Oh
We would
yeah.
go to TJ's Records, which was a hole in a wall in a strip mall, and we would ask to see his phone books. We're like, this catalog is endless. What are we gonna? What are we? And you just, well, okay, this label's been okay, and I think that's a journey in music that is so important, is when your standard gets raised by something else.
Yeah.
And, you know, the stuff you're listening to yesterday now sounds juvenile. Like that, like out of nowhere, you're like, I love this, but I like this now.
Hmm.
What is going on in the music you listen to for the better part of a year or 2 years? You're just like, that sounds juvenile now. And so that was the
That's
first
a good
time
point.
we all thought, all three of us, our little group, we were just like, this is unlike anything we've ever heard. And I swear to you, it felt like he was doing nothing but like an hour of intros. I don't think that's his style at all. But it just the anticipation, because he's known for that anticipation, that
The
buildup.
build. Hmm.
And I swear to you, it felt like it was just like an hour of like just nothing but intros of tracks, because it was, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Up, 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 up. Yeah.
It's like, where did that go? What
Yeah.
happened? I thought it was
Yeah.
going to drop, and we had
Yeah.
no idea. The place was starting to slowly fill up. I mean, this place was huge, and when it did drop, there was literally like a circle of probably like 20 people dancing like this with arms around each other. In, yeah, I mean, just like everybody lost it. And at that point, I was just like, this is probably what I'm going to pursue doing, because like the unity that was going on in that moment, you know, the whole no cell phone in sight thing.
Oh my gosh.
And
I
yeah,
love the policies I'm seeing now where they're, you put your phone in a bag and you almost coat check it now.
right.
Because people do need to get back and present to the music. And the
Oh,
visuals
absolutely.
come a long way and they're amazing, but sometimes it takes away from really experiencing the music and the journey. And so
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
completely agree with you there. No cell
Yeah.
phones was pretty epic.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So December, check this out. So December that year, so this was 97, and IRC was the way people communicated online, aside from like AOL, right? If you knew what you were doing, you were using IRC. And if you were, I guess, everyone else, I don't know. I've never been like, I know this is ridiculous, but I've never been tech savvy. Like, to
No?
any, no, listen, I was on the phone with Aaron probably 2 years ago, and I was like, Aaron, I'm ripping my first CD.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a few years ago. I was
That's
like,
awesome.
I'm ripping my first because I like the medium of technology as an art canvas is great,
Yeah.
but like I feel like sometimes you just get a little too connected to everything,
Yep.
and like who said what, notifications, and my brain can't deal with having to pause reality all the time to you know it's you like anytime you're on your phone. I mean, a lot of people like consider it like multitasking. A lot of people consider it like getting a couple things, but really most of I mean, you're not like a lot of. I would say at least 80% of people on the planet when they're on the phone, they're not making moves, right? They're
No, it's a distraction for the most
right,
part,
right,
unless you're really purposeful. Like I set a timer now for news. So
right.
I have 30 minutes at a certain point in the day, and that's it.
Yeah,
Otherwise, my daughter and I call it doom scrolling, right? It
absolutely.
serves no purpose.
Hmm.
Music I love. I love finding out more about music, but other than that, it's just not that beneficial. So it's
Yeah,
not beneficial to the creative process, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Um, okay, so 97, John Digweed. What
yeah,
a great story.
yeah.
A
Well,
fantastic
that December, here's how it
story.
gets even better.
Okay.
That December. Okay, so this is what I was getting at. So IRC. So Lauren is on IRC at his house, and when
Yeah.
this guy types, like him and Aaron, remember Aaron taught himself how to use DOS.
Mhm.
Lauren was already really good at computers and all that. When this guy types, it literally just sounds like you're racking your knuckles across a keyboard. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so he's on IRC with Joe C in Gainesville, who is the resident at my favorite club on planet Earth that ever existed was Simon's in Gainesville.
Uh-huh.
I was big as a closet, dark,
Perfect. Perfect.
and Digweed would play there all the time.
I love
And
that.
yeah, and so Joe C and Lauren were chatting it up, and I think Joe played Zen that year. He was like, "Hey, you guys need to come check out Digweed." It was the first time he saw him. He's playing here December, and Lauren's like, "Are you kidding? We're 17. We can't get in the club." He's like, "Dude, I'm the resident." I was like, "Oh, okay." So at that point, we made arrangements. We went there, and boy, wasn't that something? Because here we are, we're 17, driving 4 hours north. We're standing in this line. We're seeing people getting, refused in, and we're like,
Oh
Jesus,
yeah.
we have. And at that point, Joe sticks his head out, like just serendipitously, and Lauren's like, Joe, and Lauren, but it was their screen names.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
remember what they were,
Yeah.
but it was their screen names, and that was it. We got in. We went upstairs. I forget who was playing that night, but it is on Josie's Mixcloud, a recording of that night, and we're up there, and here comes John up the stairs. Blah 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 blah, and he had those flight cases
Oh
for
yeah.
his vinyl. He couldn't
Yep.
get one open. He couldn't do it. And he was like, my friend Aaron had a memory stick, like what you would put in a computer, right? And he had one on his keychain, and he was always popping like bottle tops and like, he was like, these things are indestructible, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, dude, give him your memory stick. He gave him his memory stick, and that's what did it. He was able to like use it almost like a bottle opener and
Yeah.
pop it open. And there it
Yeah.
was. It was like, holy moly. Well, that's crazy. But at that point in time, we're literally, because Simon's, like I said, it was like a closet.
Maybe like a
So,
hundred people, like that big.
oh no, I mean, it was like sardines. Well, more like it was, especially if John Digweed was playing. I mean, it was one of these places where lines around the block
Yeah.
all night,
Yeah.
literally all night.
Oh yeah.
You never knew what time it was until you saw the light coming through the bottom of the door. Right. You did
Hmm.
not know. And so, we were we were there. The VIP slash DJ booth was literally nothing great,
I
right?
love
No, like nothing great.
that. Yeah.
And Aaron and I just stood behind him for I would say 99% of his set. And I was just at that point, I was just like, I got to learn what this guy's doing. So I would just watch, I would just watch. And I mean, that was pretty much, that was it. I was like, all right, all right. That
Did you
was
go out and get turntables at that point?
almost. So, let me think. 97, moved to Georgia with my mom. So I
Okay.
got ripped out of high school and
Yeah.
we moved to Lafayette, or as they call it here in Georgia, Lafayette, Georgia, and fell in with a bunch of punk kids. And
Oh yeah.
I was the only raver in this one traffic light town.
Hmm.
And so I still had a bunch of Goa Trance CDs from, like the Moonshine releases when Moonshine was doing, like, it was like what, Trip Through Sound and Trance Cyberdelic, and these are still good.
Oh yeah.
Like Goa, like old school Goa, like the chops on those guys, um,
Yeah.
doing all that analog.
Amazing. There's a guy I follow on Instagram, and I can't think of his name right now, but he has the whole synthesizer wall and the
Yeah,
plugs, and he does everything analog in real time, and kind of it reminds me of Goa in the way that it's set up. It's just
right,
that's its own art form in itself because it's not DAW based.
right.
It's equipment.
So
Equipment.
I lived in Georgia for like half a year and a half, came back and ran into Tim, which was the DJ who had the psychedelic techno CD.
Hmm.
And he had since, quit DJing whatsoever, and he had these Denons, the 200F, the tray
Yeah,
loaders,
yeah,
right? Not
yeah,
Mark II or nothing, just the 200F.
yeah.
And I was like, yeah.
Rubber band drive,
Oh
basically.
yeah. I was like, hey, are you using those? Can I borrow them? So I borrowed them. I was like, this is crazy. And then eventually I bought them off of him. And my friends were like, well, if we're not going anywhere and we're having a party, you're the only DJ, so you're gonna Digweed does it 10 hours, you're gonna do it 10 hours. I was like, oh, okay. And so that's when your practice just kicks in. You gotta keep going, like even with like all this stuff today, like that tells you it literally tells you the BPM. You know what I mean? You're like,
Yeah.
we had to be better back then. And we are so spoiled with this technology right now. Like, one of the things I've talked about with fellow DJs in the past is slippery tracks that are slippery. What I mean by that is, you have a brand new track. Guess what? Their MIDI clock is the same as their MIDI clock is the same as their MIDI clock. Why? Because they're all using Ableton,
Yes.
right? Everybody's using the same MIDI clock now.
Yep.
Back then, you found a MIDI clock, or you got a secondhand MIDI. You were on, everything was different on every single person's system.
And like
Yeah,
if we're even talking vinyl,
yeah,
sometimes things were even recorded with slippage right in the vinyl, so the BPM would slow up or speed down, or you would get.
yeah.
It's funny, like you had to really listen, and I do think my daughter's actually learning right now,
Oh,
and
word.
I'm like, don't look, because I have an old controller and I
Hmm.
have my turntable still, but the old controller I have is an old Pioneer, and it doesn't have stuff on it like the current ones do. So I'm like,
Right,
don't cheat. Like, and I hate to call it cheating because it is nice to have, but if
right.
you can really learn to beat match and listen, that is the key. It is the
Absolutely.
key.
Yeah,
And listen to if it sounds good together, right? That's
right.
a whole other part now, from that cognitive dissonance that I think
Yeah.
it is its own art form. So that's interesting that you bring that up. So slippery denons.
Well, try it for yourself. If you have any kind of tracks that have been transferred from vinyl to digital, get a brand new track, right? Never mind the difference in the audio quality, just the beat matching aspect,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Hopefully that turntable was up to spec. You see what I'm saying? So
Oh,
even if you're
totally.
so
Yeah.
even if you're recording something from an older turntable, you got to hope that the RPM on that thing is pretty
Holding it
legit. Yeah.
and holding
So
tight. Yeah.
so you get these older tracks and they're like really slippery and you're like, wow, I remember mixing that flawlessly. And then you look and you look, you're like, God dang it, what have I become? You know?
Yeah.
But
So true.
it's interesting. Like I feel like we had to be better back then. Like,
Vinyl's definitely, and I like this trend right now. Like in San Jose here, there's a new audiophile bar that has
mm,
opened, and they're just doing vinyl nights now. And they've got like Julius Tapp,
mhm,
who's a local here. He comes and plays, and I'm like, that is really a cool idea to kind of bring back the analog sound and the art
yeah,
of really mixing vinyl,
yeah.
and it sounds good.
Not only that, but like the art of mastering and writing
Yes.
for that medium is completely different than just writing it, understanding that you know, red levels almost don't matter
Yeah.
anymore when you have zero noise floor. There's no noise floor.
Yeah.
So, I watched the video last night of this guy. He was like, I don't even master my stuff before I release it. I've never had a problem. I just make sure every little thing is on point with the low end and I bring everything up. That's it.
Interesting.
And it sounded fine. It
Interesting.
sounded fine. And
Yeah.
stuff that he was talking about, like I understand. I don't use compressors. I don't use anything. I don't compress anything unless it's like a vocal. As far as like uh, dance music, there's no need. Like anything that's a square wave is already compressed. Stuff like that. And he was just saying, and he showed an example, like he made sure that all of his bass was fine, making sure that notes and frequencies literally match up, because notes are frequencies. And so he was like, I make sure all my bass and my low end and this, that, and the third. And he's like, so then I bring it up to about plus 3 or 4 dB, and it was red. I was like, oh, okay, well, let's see this to the end. He's like, and if you're listening right now, nothing sounds bad. And so he bounced it and then he pulled it back and he was like, all that red that was in the DAW, and he was using Ableton, he was like, it doesn't exist really. And when he opened up the track that he bounced in place in Ableton, the track came back just fine.
Interesting.
Yeah, even though it played in the red, when he bounced it and within Ableton and opened it in another track, it was fine. So back then there was none of that. Like you had to master to make sure that the needle didn't fly out.
Things have changed radically. Yeah, the needle would fly out of vinyl if it wasn't properly brought in. That's interesting. So we're gonna take a break and play some of your mixes,
Okay.
your tracks, and I want to talk next about your tracks. And then we can have some. I'm going to put your photos up while we play those tracks in the
Okay.
break. And then we'll come back and talk about your kind of your. I think we need to talk about your 2000s as
Okay.
your DJing, as well as when you kind of got into music production. Um, but we'll be right back. Welcome back. We just had some music from Ryan Frame and some photo collages from his years in music. We're going to continue the conversation with where we left off. Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you to continue talking about your journey. So we were talking about your favorite club, which is also my favorite kind of club: dark,
Mhm.
packed, not fancy.
Right.
Things have changed in that arena, and I actually like the older days from that.
Oh yeah.
So where did the music go next for you after these early discovery days with your Denons and John Bigweed, and what happened for you next?
Well, there was a lot of being the kind of music it is. It's not typical go buy a guitar.
Mhm.
It's not.
It is not.
So it's literally whatever you can get your hands on to make anything. And my brother uh, and his girlfriend at the time basically just donated to me a laptop with SoundForge and what was it? Sony Acid in Vegas.
Okay, yeah.
And so you just start sampling stuff, and I made stuff and played it for my friends back home, and everybody loved it. And uh during this time period, right? So my brother, he went to Full Sail in Orlando for digital media and stuff like that, and he ran into a guy there named Lance Hendricks, he had a residency at, I think it was Firestone, probably all other kind of places, and he had opened Love Parade
Oh wow.
with on the Tunnel Truck, and the Tunnel Club, if I'm right, is where Paul Van Dyke got his start. And during the late, like especially when I got back from Georgia, so like from like 97 to probably 2001 ish, uh, Lance was doing what was called Trance Domain, and it was a bunch of DJs from all over in Orlando. Robbie Clark, who was on earlier this year on my show, he was one of them, and he has a rap sheet that's just unbelievable. Started in '87, I
Wow.
believe,
Wow.
and yeah, read his bio on my post page, and I mean, like, he wrote for Rolling Stone, all this stuff. Like he like the guy is just amazing. He's a wealth of music, and so him, uh, geez, there's so many people like Susie Solar,
Yeah.
Noel Sanger,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
uh, yeah. Um, there's just so many people came out of that scene. Anyway, so my brother was doing visual media and flyers for all these people.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
so yeah, and so that's like where I was involved in that circle. Lance had me play a couple times uh on Trans Domain, and this was like back in the 90s, so he had to have like the Boss Hog computer to be able to stream audio for people to listen to that was worth a damn.
Yes.
And I remember I learned on turntables at Lance's house one night. um Marco Zifferano from Germany was supposed to be on the show. Like, he was supposed to fly in, but something happened, X, Y, and Z. He didn't. And so at that point, I just hopped on, right? Because I'd been using the Denons for a hot minute, and in principle, is literally the same thing. I don't care if it's like a little app on your phone. It's the principle is the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, and that was it. That was how I learned. And every now and then, when I would go visit my brother, like there was one time it was like BT and Crystal Method were playing at Firestone.
Oh yeah.
And so I'd go to Lance's and we'd hang out there, or whatever, and I just go off into the back room. And I mean, he eventually had to like renovate his garage into like this studio so that all his records could fit and everything like that. And I mean, he had a lot. So that's when I learned on vinyl. And my whole thing about vinyl versus digital is, I feel like, one's like driving automatic and one's like driving a standard shift. It's really,
Absolutely. That is
you
such a
know,
good, yeah, it's good to be flexible too and be able to
yeah,
drive both.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
agreed. Love
And I
that.
mean, I remember there was one time when the X-Men movie, the first
Mhm.
one, came out on DVD.
Yeah.
Everybody and their grandmother was in the living room watching it. And I just cloistered myself away in Lance's room and just like, I mean, I was coming across stuff I was hearing like John Digweed play, and I was like, oh, so that's what I need to look for. And so what I would do is I would all these different tracks that I was like familiar with, because back then you would never like it took me the better part of, I mean, to find Human Movement Traveler's Theme. Like I was just like I was like, when I finally found that again, like after hearing it, I was like, oh my God. Like I've been trying to like Fluid, anything on Fluid recordings, like
The fluid label. Oh yeah.
it's just
Did you, so every trip I ever went on in like 2000 to 2004, I was in every record store in every city I went in looking for precious, hard to find
yeah.
vinyl. And then I discovered htfr.com,
Mm-hmm.
the UK one, and that is where I had my vinyl addiction for a couple of years because you could get, it was kind of the early Beatport, right? But for
Right.
vinyl, you could find, there was no, I think when I was first shopping on it, you couldn't even listen to a sample. You'd see the name,
Right.
be like Peter Heller, and be like, yep,
Right.
spending £12.99
Right.
for
Yeah.
US dollars to get some records. But
Yeah.
that used to be part of the adventure, was actually going out hunting.
Crate digging,
Yes.
hunting,
And
the pursuit.
I still call it pursuit, but
Yeah.
it's way easier now.
Yeah.
Way
Yeah. It's that whole thing has changed. We would, if ever we found ourselves going north and John Digweed wasn't playing, because my friends and I would like make it a point that, I mean, almost every single time he played in Gainesville between 98 and 2000, we would go. So if we weren't doing that and we found ourselves north, or I was visiting my brother and we were hanging out or whatever, we would go to, in Tampa, there was Neptune Records,
Oh yeah.
which was really cool because they had a little spot for you to record a set if you wanted.
Oh, I
Like
love that.
like a little spot, and there's a curtain, almost like a changing room, and you go in there and there's a little tape deck and there's some 12s, and you can, I can't remember if it was like by the hour you pay a certain amount and you go in there and you just, pick anything from the store you like, which is amazing because now Beatport does the same thing. So like with the SE6000s, you can connect to the internet on them,
Mhm.
and through like the proper Beatport subscription,
Yeah.
you can literally stream anything that's on Beatport for release right now straight
Yeah.
to your decks.
Yeah.
It's almost like the same concept, to try before you buy, and that was
Yeah.
one of the things that I absolutely loved about this genre. For me, it was recordstore.co.uk,
Oh yeah.
and because you could get discs, right? And because I was digital, and I remember like people being like, "Oh, you're digital." It's like now everybody's digital. And what was the other one? PlanetXUSA.com.
Oh, I remember that too.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
yeah,
we're doing the way back. I love that.
yeah.
So which was your favorite record shop that you went to in the early 2000s that you ever went to?
There was one in Orlando. I can't remember the name of it.
Orlando's
I want to say it was like called Cosmic Debris, but I think that was like a skate shop in my hometown.
yeah,
I can't remember,
yeah.
but it was. I have to ask Aaron, but it was like, it was so cool because it was larger than most. Um, Flyers everywhere. Gosh, I wish I still had some, like, I used
Yeah.
to have such a collection. Now I only have like a handful,
You kept
but
it.
flyers everywhere.
Yeah.
Incense, hippie play. I mean, it's just
The
bohemian, just like, just
patchouli, like
yeah,
some of my vinyl still smells like. There's a record shop in Cleveland that I used
yeah,
to go to, and Doug Burkhart ran the
yeah.
store, Gramophone Records, I believe, and he would have, patchouli burning in the store, and your records would smell like it.
It
And
gets baked into the.
I
It's
loved
just,
it.
it's there forever now.
Oh my God, I loved it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The tactile. So, okay. So you got into and you were in that good Florida progressive early scene. And
Oh
it was
yeah,
it was dominant there. You had Jimmy Van M was part of that too.
Yeah.
He ended up traveling with John Digweed and
Oh
Bedrock.
yeah. Chris
Um,
Fortier.
oh my God, love Chris
Yeah.
Ford. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
such
was talking to him one night at Simon's, and he was still actually in school for like digital media.
yeah,
It was Halloween. It was it's the Halloween, the one that the flyer that I sent you, the picture of the 98. And boy, was that a night.
just stay up all night
Oh,
and then some.
yes. Yes, you could say that. Yes, it was
Yeah, yeah.
definitely it was an all-nighter. I was not expecting to go. I'm telling you, that is a story in and of itself. Like the story of me getting there and how that happened, because I was not expecting to go. That's a whole nother, that is another time to discuss, because that it needs to, like, I almost need to like write a short story about that.
You
Like
should. Those
just
are,
getting there.
and those are. It reminds me of that movie Human Traffic. Did you ever
Yeah.
see that same movie Human
Mm-mm.
Traffic that Pete Tong put out? And there's always those early 2000 experiences, late 90s. There was always some weird, like trying to get a ticket or trying to get
Yeah.
in or trying to
Yeah.
like know somebody, or there's all kinds of adventures that
Yeah.
unfolded that are part of your memory
Now
forever.
it's even bright.
Yeah,
That's it.
totally.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just even bright. You know, that's it. That's all there is to it. You got your code. All right, you're in. You got your code. All right, you're in.
Uh-huh.
It's like the whole, like, you know, the this is part of my grudge with technology, is that uh it holds us hostage to some degree, to some level. And I mean, there's no escaping it unless you're like a monk in Tibet.
Totally.
And so, you know, I call like things like Facebook and uh you know, Instagram and all these places, like I feel like I call it proof of life. And I say that deliberately because that's like a hostage negotiation term. Is proof of life is when the negotiator asks for proof that the person you're holding ransom for the helicopter that's coming to whisk you away with the $1 million in a bag
Yeah.
is alive, and we're definitely sending the helicopter. If yeah, like, and people try to prove that they're alive, and you don't need to do that. You're alive. You're here. If you're experiencing anything that's in reality around you, you're alive. You don't
Yeah.
need to prove to someone that you ate a shrimp cocktail. You don't like like it's all right. It's okay. You know, I had a hamburger the other day. You know, it's like it's okay.
No, we're
You
not
know,
doing
you're not any less of a person if you went to a show and you didn't get snaps of it. You know what I mean? Like your memory of that show is going to be of the back of your phone. It's
that.
not going to be of, you know, Tool or whoever you went to see.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
was true.
like
Yeah.
it's a hostage situation that people, you know, they get addicted to it. There's, you know, there are some people out there, I'm sure, whose like literal only connection with reality is through whatever social media they have.
Yeah.
And I feel like the scene is starting to get dangerously close to, I mean, for many promoters, it's already there. It's like, you know, what's your Instagram following? What's, you know, what's your image? And, you know, I'm definitely of the DJ Dan, John Digweed, like, don't worry about me.
Right.
Right? I'm doing fine. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing what I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
Take care of your moment,
Yeah.
right?
Enjoy it.
Be in your moment. Don't worry if, you know, whatever I'm doing,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
be in your moment and enjoy this music.
Yeah.
You know, so
That's good. That's really
yeah.
good. So I want to talk about, we played some of your music on the break.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of talk about, I don't know if you want to get into kind of your different names that you go by now, or kind of how that came to be, or did you want to kind of move in from, you learned to DJ, you definitely
Yeah.
are playing around with some production stuff. When did
Oh, yeah.
you get more focused on your production? What year?
Uh, so the first time I ever had anything all 100% to me, Lauren built me a computer out of scraps that he had.
Wow.
And it
Wow.
was such good scraps. You know what I mean? Like that's how, you know, I mean, I was talking to him and I was like, yeah, I just need my own computer and this, that, and the third. And I can probably get started on something. He's like, he opens his closet door. He's like, I'll build you something real quick. I'm like, okay.
Good
So
time.
he put together this computer. This is probably 2003, 4-ish. I had already been back in my hometown for quite some time.
Mhm.
And I got a cracked version of Reason 3.
Oh,
No,
wow. Yeah.
2. It was
Yeah.
2.5, I think. And I'm
Wow.
still on Reason. Like
Okay.
that's my go-to.
I have
And
I have a co-producer friend who's still very embedded with Reason
oh
and like,
yeah, Reason is like, we love that other people don't use it. Because it is such a unique sound. Like not only that, but the hardware aspect of it. I went to audio engineering school, so I had already experienced Reason, and then you go learn everything, and then you get back into Reason. You're like, oh my gosh, this is great because now I can use all my principles that I learned and actually just like build something. I don't have to buy a VST. My VST library is so small. I guarantee you, like people like I feel like there's a problem with production where people are just like hoping that they find that one that just kind of it's like that doesn't exist. There's no you're gonna be a jack of all trade, master of none. You're gonna have a tool shed full of tools you don't use.
yeah.
And so I mean, when I was going to SAE, we had Chris Huston who recorded all of James Brown's early stuff. I think he recorded the first Led Zeppelin album. And, he was just in a classroom with us and he was talking and it was time for questions. And I had a question. And I guess, it was the way I worded it, but my original question was, what's your favorite EQ? What I meant was, is there a sound? Is there a EQ that makes a good sound that you like to put over something that, blah, blah, blah. He says, my favorite EQ is the one I don't have to use.
That's an interesting answer.
It's a brilliant answer because audio capturing a moment is the same mentality as a photograph, right? Your mic is the lens, right? You have your medium, which is, now they've been dealing with digital. So
Mhm.
now, there's all kinds of stuff that they don't have to worry about, but they still prefer. Same thing, how we still prefer, like maybe, that's why we have tape emulators for crying out loud. It's like, you know, um, but it's true. It's the one you don't have to use. If you can capture that moment with the right lens and this, that, and the third, if I can record something with just the mic and get it just right with just the mic,
Right.
there's a whole lot of engineering that I don't even have to worry about now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've been using Reason since then, and that was really what started getting me into sleepless nights.
Oh, totally. The,
Just
the rabbit hole.
yeah, just like what is this? Oh, what does this do? What does this do? What does this do? How can I do that? How can I do that? Um, having spent years basically steeped in the theory, I would go to Simon's sober more than any of my friends. Like we would go, and it was just like school is in,
Yeah.
school is in. I would sit on this one speaker that was across from the DJ booth. I would literally, every now and then I'd get out there and, boogie down, but I'm
Sure.
telling you, I would sit on this speaker all night and just listen,
Yeah.
and just pay attention.
Yeah.
And sometimes it got pretty crowded. You have to stand up on the speaker, right? Like there's nothing you can do. Oh God, I remember there was this one time I stand up on the speaker, and you know how sometimes if someone is like above you and they're standing and you're like, oh God, that dude just sweat on me, right? Well, I
Yeah.
was like, oh wait, somebody just I'm like, how is somebody sweating on me? I'm standing on the speaker and I look up and literally I didn't even notice it, but the fire alarm was going off in Simon's. It was so hot. It was so hot. There was condensation building on the roof, on the ceiling, and
Oh,
dripping down. And the fire alarm was going off. And I was like, I didn't even know. You could, I mean, I'm sure it was making a sound,
of course.
but
Nobody
it's
heard
just
it.
blending right into everything. It was just, but yeah, you get steeped in the sound, and so and you're like, okay, so I've heard a lot. I know what it should do, and then it comes into, you know, I don't like that hi hat. No,
Yeah.
not that one either. No,
Yeah.
not that one. Nope, nope, nope. Down arrow, down arrow, down arrow, down like forever, forever
Yeah.
and ever until you find that one. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. That is good. So what year did you have your first record that you I always say the first one you didn't hate.
I don't know. There's been, I mean, and there's a whole lot that I haven't even sent you that was written during my years at audio engineering school at SAE in Nashville that
That's cool.
are not they're dance four to the floor, sure. They got the break beat kind of sprinkled in there somewhere, but
Yeah.
I had the hardest time. I had the hardest time for the longest time making it DJ friendly. Right. And it's only recently, like within the past 3 or 4 years that I've like had to kind of like bite the bullet because I do want to construct something. And I do come from that time period where it was like you had a 2 minute intro in a song because you have to
You
get
were
your
mixing. You were mixing
yes,
for 2 minutes.
yes,
You weren't doing a 32 measure mix. You were doing 64. You were doing 128. Like
yeah,
that was progressive.
yeah. And a lot of that has to do with wanting to get your money's worth out of the vinyl. Like it costs a lot to press records.
It
And
does.
so if you're a record label and you're literally pressing records, you're sitting there saying, well, you got 12 minutes, make a 12-minute track. So BT was always famous for making these elaborate intros. After a minute and a half, you finally get right. It's just like, all right, okay. So,
Yeah.
it's hard to break that habit. I like, and understanding that the music that you're writing is bigger than just you.
Yeah.
So it's not just an emotion. It's not just a groove. It's not just a phrase. It's a tool. And it took me a long time to kind of like get that into my head, even though I was, a DJ myself, writing stuff and this, that, and the third. It's like I still just, when I got into writing mode, like it was very difficult for me to blend the two mindsets together where, okay, as a DJ, and then I put my own stuff on. I was like, I can't mix this. The intro is all over the place. It sounds fine. It's on beat. It's on tempo. It does, right? It does, but it
Doesn't
doesn't.
work together.
So I've had to figure out over the past few years, and it's not like I don't say figure out like it's some sort of secret sauce, right? It's pretty easy. You start out with tick, 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 and you can bring something in and make it very simple, make it DJ friendly.
Yeah.
But it's the holding back that's difficult. So I would say recently, like with the stuff that I've sent you, starting with the things that were like released on the Nashville Resistance um, collaborations with, I mean, everyone on those releases are talented. Uh, that's finally when I was like, okay, I'm kind of starting to get the idea that it needs to be like, okay, just start it. So like pretty recently, I would say.
I love it. I just started learning how to produce in this
Mhm.
last year. It's very early. I'm a novice at best. But it is a constant process of learning and refinement.
Absolutely.
And I'm barely scratching the surface, much less getting good at it. So I've really enjoyed your music and listening to it. Are you working on anything now? Anything you're working on that you want to talk about that's going to be give
Yeah,
us?
I'm working on some more of that absent present.
Okay.
Um, and actually, I would say the first time I used a song was in November last year that I wrote. That's the first time I can legitimately say that I put a track of mine into something. Um, and the idea is that I want to get a label going,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's the team assembly. Like I realize that it can't just be me. I know uh, there are producers out there that um, have their own labels, and it's literally just them. Like I think Mark Romboy is one of them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He has it's just him. It's just him. It's just his stuff. I think Rimcord has Reba. I'm almost 100% that Reba is nothing but Rimcord, and I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say it's probably Rimcord, which is
Mhm.
smart because even if you are making stuff and getting signed, what's the harm in having your own stuff under your own label sitting on Beatport?
Yeah.
Nothing
Oh
wrong with that. But I I wanted different names just to kind of switch it up. Um,
Alter egos, so to speak.
kind of to that effect, but at the same time, it was like the old Platypus Records. It was three guys,
Hmm.
and they worked on each other's projects. Like I saw Union Jack at Simon's.
Yes.
It was a perfecto platypus party.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
mean, Paul Oakenfold, and then it was Union Jack, and I think Taylor was there. Uh,
Oh,
Taylor
Taylor
was Taylor. Like, what happened to
Transport.
that guy?
Oh my
Like,
God. Oh,
he was like Digweed's evil twin. That's the only way I can describe like
so good.
Taylor.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, that guy Taylor. If you're out there and you're listening, where are you?
So funny.
Where are you?
Jerry Bonham is on speaking of social media, and Jerry
Mhm,
Bonham's been posting a lot of nostalgic things too. And he and Taylor
mhm.
used to play together. So I haven't heard a word of Taylor. Probably
Yeah,
married with kids somewhere.
I mean, what is it? Synesthesia. The Synesthesia CD is absolutely, it's unbelievable.
Yep,
It was so good. Um,
so good.
yeah, there's so many good tracks off of that. I remember that was like one of the first DJ CDs that my friends and I, because Napster started rearing its head,
Oh yeah.
um, they were actively pursuing stuff.
Hmm.
The one track that I would say that I would love to absolutely have from back in the day is Shapeshifter Flood.
I have,
That's
I have
on. Oh,
a,
yeah, that's the one. That's the
yeah,
one from Sydney.
yeah.
From some Sydney. Yeah, that's that one right there. I remember I was getting my hair cut. My friend, she was cutting my hair. All of a sudden, it just drops out and just doom 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 doom. I'm like, what is going on? What is he doing? And it just, god dang, that track is so amazing.
So much,
Um,
so much good music.
yeah.
So for people that are watching this episode, I'm
Mm,
going to put your links in. Again, speaking of social media.
mhm,
Uh, so your Mixcloud
mhm.
under Ryan Frame, and
Yep.
the episodes are called Minutia. And
Yep.
you had episode 16, which featured me, which was
Yeah.
very kind of you. And then your other names that you go by
Yeah.
for your productions. Can you talk a little bit about those and kind of
Yeah.
bridge
They
them?
yeah, they don't really exist anywhere. The different names, it's just it's they're kind of on the way. Um, it's like I was saying, the whole Platypus Records. It's just like three guys making tracks under different pseudonyms. That's kind of like what I'm doing until
I
I
love
can get the ball rolling and say, would you like to jump on board?
it. Yeah,
Because it's a group effort. You know what I mean? Like to get something going seriously, like it's a group effort. And
it is.
um, I'm I'm happy that I have there's two guys here that I talk to occasionally since I've gotten to Atlanta, and that's Zen Jafari and Don Rubiano. And they play at District. Don Rubiano plays at Odyssey Afters, which is an after hour club in
Mhm.
Atlanta.
Oh, awesome.
Doesn't open until 3 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he both of them were guests. And those are definitely people that I'm glad I have connections with. But
Yeah.
the monikers, the pseudonyms, those they're on their way. Um, but like I said, like it's about getting it done right. Finding the right sounds.
Yeah.
Like I'm still trying to adjust my ears to the space that I'm in right now. I got my paneling up and everything, and the cloud, and it's just trying to you know make something that's worthwhile. Not everything, not every day is going to be productive,
No.
but you got to try something every day. You got to, because like you might come across some phrase that you're playing around with, uh, and then a few days later it pops up into your head. You got to try to do something every day.
You do.
Um, so the only real link that I do have a SoundCloud, but it's kind of languishing because I've been focusing more on, as far as music, I've been focusing more on production than release,
Yeah.
and focusing more on the connections through minutia right now. Like the first year of minutia was just me,
Yeah.
and there was I want to say it was like a 3 month hiatus because I'd gotten in a car wreck. So from
Mm.
episode 1 to episode 2, I think there was like 3 months of nothing. And so I
I
I've been
really enjoy you and all your guests on Minutia. And for those listening, if you haven't checked it out on Mixcloud yet, it's under Ryan Frame, and it's a fantastic progressive show. I've really enjoyed. I've
thank you.
discovered several people, which I always love to find new people to listen to. So it's been very well put together. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't go, I'll be honest, I don't go looking for necessarily like people with accolades, or I honestly, I don't even pay attention to it. Like
No,
I literally go down through whoever's following. Like, follow me. All right, blah, blah, blah. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you got. And I feel like that's one of the things, like, if I were to ever wear the promoter hat,
yeah,
that's how I would pick talent for the shows. Like, what have you got? You know, as opposed to, who my friend is.
yeah, oh, yeah,
And a lot of times you get that favoritism, and a scene will languish if it gets too bad. I'm all about, people helping others and giving your friends, some help, but you can miss out on a lot of unknown talent out there if you just focus on your entourage,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So whenever I have chosen anyone, I went for Robbie Clark because obviously there's the ships that pass in the night scenario,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
I don't even know if he even I don't even know if we ever like formally met. But I mean, for crying out loud, as many times as I was over at Lance's just hanging out with my brother, um, surely he may have been there once or twice, but really I just reached out because it was December, episode of Minutia was 8 was out, and I was just flipping, and checking the charts, and I was like, holy crap, there's Robbie Clark. I'm right next to Robbie Clark. So I sent him a Facebook. I was like, hey man, check it out. Like, we're right next to each other. And then I, like they say, it never hurts to ask, right? So I was just like, hey man, blah 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 blah. And he was more than happy. I will say this right now, out of anyone on my feed, Robbie Clark is not just living his best life now, but like now and
Oh,
now and right now. Like the guy is, and I'm so happy because he's such a great person to work with. But yeah, that's basically how I choose people for minutia. Just
love it.
yeah,
It's such a good way. It's and I don't want to use the word old school way, but it is kind of how the scene started too, right? We all kind of saw potential in other people, and you bring other people around. So
yeah,
it's really really great. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, Ryan, and I'll put your links for your Mixcloud show in the post as well. And until next time.
yeah,
We can maybe I'd love to do another mix with you soon, and
yeah,
have you on my show. So
yeah. No worries. Yeah,
we'll do that next, and appreciate your time today. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you for having me.